And now a word from our friends at Prose Playground. This June 10th, Prose Playground welcomes Anne Lamott and Neil Allen for a free community-wide In Conversation. On May 18th, the 10 Spreadsheets event will give you everything you need to know to launch your book. To join both events for free, visit proseplayground.com and sign up today. Welcome to Let's Talk Memoir, a podcast for memoir lovers, readers, and writers. I'm your host, Ronit Plank. Let's Talk Memoir is also a Substack newsletter. About once a month, I publish memoir craft advice, answer questions about memoir writing, and share my latest classes and upcoming events. You can go to substack.com and subscribe to Let's Talk Memoir for free. You can also find me, Ronit, on Instagram and on Blue Sky.
Ronit, hello.
Hi, Jill.
Thank you for joining me on your own podcast today.
Well, thank you so much for having me on my podcast.
It's a joy. If you are listening to the sound of my voice right now, you know that Ronit Plank is a treasure in the memoir world. So when I learned that her amazing memoir about surviving a precarious childhood and seeking safety for herself, her younger sister, and eventually the secure family she would build with no blueprint to follow had not been featured on Let's Talk Memoir, I presented that idea to Ronit so we could make it right. And she said yes. So my name is Jill Christman, and I know precious little about podcasting, which is probably already obvious, although I bring to today's project a tremendous amount of enthusiasm. And I did actually once help produce a podcast, Indelible, Campus Sexual Violence. But I want to assure you that I know a lot about reading and writing memoir. I'm a professor at Ball State University, where I co-edit River Teeth, a journal of nonfiction narrative, and our daughter online weekly magazine of micro essays, Beautiful Things. I've been teaching creative nonfiction writing for nearly 30 years, and my fourth book and third memoir, The Heart Folds Early, just came out in the American Live series at the University of Nebraska Press, and that is all you're going to hear about me. I was just trying to establish some credibility here so I could work up the nerve to be on the other side of the mic from Ronit. Here is more about our guest, who is also our host, but is also our guest. You got it? So my vision is that I'll do a version of my best Jill is the amazing and generous Ronit. So some questions will be fundamental questions that Let's Talk Memoir listeners will recognize, but turned around, and others will be just for Ronit. Ronit, you have done so much to support, promote, and deepen understanding in the world of memoir, a pretty small world, really, and it's high time you got some airtime for yourself. Would you like to say a hello before I do your formal introduction?
Absolutely. Hello. And Jill, I know it's going to come across throughout our whole interview, but I am utterly beside myself with glee that you invited me to do this and that you thought of it and that we're actually doing it.
Oh, thank you. I've been excited like for weeks about this. So excited. So I hope that I can be like a quarter of the interviewer that you are. Okay, so more about Ronit. Ronit's essays and fictions have been featured in, listen to this list of publications for real: The Atlantic, The Rumpus, The New York Times, The Iowa Review, The Washington Post, Writer's Digest, American Literary Review, and many, many other places. Her memoir, When She Comes Back, about the loss of her mother to the guru Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh and their eventual reconciliation, won a Book Excellence Award and was named a Book Riot Best True Crime Book in 2021, and was a finalist for a slew of other prizes. It's a very good book. Her short story collection, Home is a Made-Up Place, won the Hidden River Arts 2020 Eludia Award and was published just 1 year later in 2022. So I will ask her about that relationship between those books. And she is a host and a producer of Let's Talk Memoir, a podcast for memoir lovers, readers, and writers, where we are right now. And when I was doing my research for this interview, I learned that Nick Sims called Ronit the Terry Gross of memoir, which made me happy indeed. So Ronit, welcome to Let's Talk Memoir.
Thank you so much for having me, Jill.
Can you share a bit about When She Comes Back, which was published in 2021 by Motina Books? So it's 5 years old. Just tell us about the book.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. So, I thought that this was a book when I was writing it about my mom leaving my family several times when I was young and what happened to me afterward. But as I was writing the book, I began to understand that it was about a lot more than that. And we'll get into that, I'm sure, shortly when we talk about story versus situation. But it's basically a story about both of my parents leaving, about being raised by a single father in an apartment in Queens with a fair share of roaches and longing for my mother and coming of age without a woman around as an example and to soften the transition into womanhood and to be the eldest daughter, older sister who wants those roles and leans into them hard to realize she doesn't want to be tasked with that kind of responsibility, still misses her mom, still is trying to figure out how to be a woman and love herself and her body when she's been rejected. And it's also about giving up control and what happens to people when they give their power to people like gurus and spiritual leaders and multi-level marketing people. And it's about learning how to differentiate perhaps between what happened to you and who you are and what that means about yourself.
That was such a beautiful description of the book. It says so much about how much you wove into this book, which so clearly, when I read it at River Teethite, one of the things we say is that we want to publish the thing that people were born to write, right? Which is a pretty high bar. And I so feel the necessity of this memoir when I read it, right? And then in your description, I thought that was just lovely. Okay, I have a sub question there, but I really want for you to read to us right away so that those listeners who are not familiar with the book can get a taste of it. Okay. This might feel like cheating, but I thought that the beginning of the book was a really great place to start. You chose it for a reason, and it really sets the story in motion beautifully. So I'm gonna, Ronit finds her page. She's gonna read to us from the prologue, the first page and a half or so.
Okay, great. Prologue, Newark, 1978. When my mother told us she was going to visit Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh's ashram, I was 6 years old and my sister was 3. She was taking us to see our father for the first time since he'd left the year before, but I remember the promise she made. She would be back at the end of the summer to collect Nava and me and bring us home to Seattle. I had no idea at the time that she would be absent from my life for decades to come, or that my mother was committing herself to a cult. It was well past my bedtime when we landed at Newark Airport. I pressed my face to the window as the plane taxied and came to a stop, but could only make out a few small luggage trucks pulling up to meet us in the dark. "Come on, Ronit," she said, grabbing her purse and hoisting Nava into her arms. I glanced at the adults standing in the aisle behind me and followed my mother off the plane. The sticky June air hit me as soon as I stepped on the jetway, and though it was late, the terminal teemed with people. I kept my eyes on my mother, who walked ahead with Nava in her arms, searching for my father, her mouth tight, her face unreadable. I, too, searched for my father among the men near the gate, though I wasn't sure I remembered exactly what he looked like, and I wonder now if he felt the same. We hadn't seen each other since he'd come to our rental house after their divorce a year before to say goodbye. My mother slowed to a stop and put Nava down. My father stood just ahead, mustached and big-haired, wearing the same thick glasses he'd had for years and a long-sleeved collared shirt. I leaned down and told my sister, "That's Daddy." I smiled at him like I might at a stranger, unsure if he would smile back. And suddenly, before I had time to see what his response would be, he picked me up and hugged me, swinging me around as he did. It was a change from the tentativeness between my mother and me. There had been less of her to hold on to for a while.
Thank you. That's so beautiful. I have a lot of things I want to say about how perfect of a place that was to begin and how much of the rest of the book it contains, which I think is really hard work that we do as memoirists. But I want to hear from you first. Why did you choose that for the beginning? And if you want to add into this question, I realize in teaching, they laugh at me because my questions are usually like 5 parts. Okay. That's not good for podcasting. Why did you start here? Let me ask that first. Why did you start here?
Yeah, I do that too. I always have to like be patient when I ask and know it'll get there, or I can ask a follow-up, but I get it. Many thoughts come to mind. And I love that you asked this, because when I was studying with Deborah Courtney, my mentor at Pacific University, who introduced me to you, who actually suggested I read your book, Dark Room, back when I was getting my MFA. So again, full circle moment to be speaking with you today. I mean, I can't believe it, really, honestly. So,
and I love me some Deborah Courtney. I just want to throw that out there.
Oh, please. I could talk for a long time about how I didn't want to write memoir and how she just said, write it already. And then I was converted. And I just looked up to her like a guru, which of course is a whole nother problem. But anyway, so the prologue, I understood through studying with Deborah, that really the beginning of the book helps to set the tone for the rest of the book. And it's offering clues to the reader about what they can look for and keep their eye out about this story of transformation or story of becoming. And I understood. So this memory was seminal for me. When I started collecting ideas for what would be in the book, it was very clear to me that this drop-off at Newark Airport had to be there. It was really the beginning of the whole rest of what happened. So I knew it was going to be in the book. And as I went through the structure, I realized this would be a powerful place to start, because I know I would want to know what happened if I read a story that started like this. What the heck is going on here? She hasn't seen her dad. I mean, just objectively, right? I'm not saying that even if I executed it poorly or not, like the bare bones of the story are really kind of interesting on a basic level. Why hasn't she seen her father? Why is her mom following a guru? Why in the world is the mom tense? What is the role of this daughter? Why is she noticing this? All that. And then as I read it just now to you, and I have read this section before because I do like the way it sets up the book, it helps people understand a little bit about what will come next.
Yeah.
I also saw it as an opportunity to show the reader in very, compact ways, my role as the older sister with the younger sister. I'm already going to be steering my sister toward understanding how to operate in this family and to guide her. So you get to see all that. And I also really I'm really happy. I always smile a little when I read the part about looking in the aisle on the airplane at the other people standing up when I'm just a little girl, because I did do that. And you've been on a plane when little kids start looking around at the adults around them, and they're kind of clocking everything. That's really true to who I am and to a lot of people, what they do. So I love that you asked this question. And I think we could talk for a long time about the prologue. And I don't know that all books need a prologue, but this is definitely following that structure of something dramatic is happening in progress when you open the book. And then you can go back a little bit and look at some backstory, but you have to hook the reader.
Yeah. And you fully do. And the thing that I noticed, and I noticed it throughout the whole prologue, which goes on for another page or so, are those small. So you have this really intense and interesting scene, but it is embedded with these really intimate observations, like the fact, for example, that you point out that you're the one as a child who leans down to Nava and says, that's daddy, right? So here's a situation with 2 adults, but who's in charge, right? Who needs to take care of things?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Which of course is something that we follow throughout the rest of the book.
That was very helpful to me when Deborah said that. And when I teach memoir, I always talk about this, the breadcrumbs basically that you're leaving. Because I think that memoir readers, most readers are really curious and interested. I think memoir readers, especially those who love memoir, are on the hunt for clues. We want to understand what it is we need to know about this person emotionally and psychologically. And we want all of that. And we want it to kind of be a rich portrait of the person and be very satisfying by the end. So it's never too early to start laying those clues down.
Yeah, exactly. And I know you teach classes on this, and I would like to take one someday. But one thing I always tell my students, is life doesn't come with plot, right? But memoir does, right? So I know this is a thing that we share, a drum that we beat together. And right. So at the very beginning, and I do want to talk about your handling of time, which I think is so artful throughout the book. But at the very beginning in that first paragraph, I had no idea at the time that she would be absent from my life for decades to come. Right. So we're in the scene Ronit is 6, and we know that we're able to look back from this forward place and know
Mm-hmm.
that everything is changing and will never be the same again after this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just you nailed it with the prologue, is what I'm saying.
Thank
Now
you.
I could ask, and I don't have an opinion on this. I'm actually a prologue girly myself. I enjoy a
Uh-huh.
prologue.
Well, I was scared when you sent me the questions ahead of time, which you said you did because I do that for you and other guests. I wondered if you were anti-prologue or, we were going to talk
Yeah,
about prologue and
yeah.
epilogue.
Why
And
do we have to have camps like that? I don't know.
Wait, are we anti? We don't all need them. You can start with chapter
Yes.
1. And maybe I could have made
Yeah,
that chapter 1 actually, but I think it's because I just think it's semantics. You can call it chapter
I do
1, you can
too.
call it
I do
prologue.
too.
I'm not like firmly in one camp or another.
Yeah, I just think we need things to have panels about, so
Yeah,
we
well,
have to
we
be
can have
like
panels. Let's just have panels all the time.
we have to be pro, or but when I first read this book, I was like, oh, she went prologue and epilogue. You go, girl.
Yeah, that's right. Now you know a little bit more about me, Jill.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, the epilogue was an accident. And I do want to say a lot of this, maybe we'll get to this, but I stumbled into this. I was not a memoir aficionado when I wrote this book. Was
Yeah.
reading them for my MFA. I
Yeah.
had to read 80 books or whatever and analyze them and do a thesis. But I was a fiction writer
Yeah.
and I did not.
Same. I began as a fiction writer
Yes,
as well.
because
Yeah,
people
same.
didn't hold space for nonfiction and memoir back then,
No.
right? They didn't understand the genre the same. It's really evolved and memoir has taken off. And I want to say, I just was talking to my agent about this. Let me say that you can do a search for the most popular nonfiction category in books. It is still firmly autobiography and memoir. And I
Oh,
will
wow.
say, like, even though the publishing world likes to say memoir is hard to sell, it is actually what readers want. It is the most
Yeah.
popular category in nonfiction. So I love that we are in this, in my opinion, memoir renaissance or memoir resurgence or memoir
Yeah.
bloom. But when I wrote the book, it was very new to me. I didn't have a
Yeah.
lot in my wheelhouse. And so I want to say quite by accident, I may have arrived at some of this, but the voice and the calibration of time, which we may get to, that was really hard for me because in fiction, the voice of your narrator, who's telling the
Yeah.
story first or third, is it omniscient, blah, blah, blah. But in memoir, it's not just you, Jill, or me, Ronit, telling the story. It's
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
persona basically that we create. And I didn't understand it very well when I started. And
Yeah.
then I didn't know how much I could mess with the character me. How much can older narrator me go in there and mess around and
Yeah.
like narrate and guide this person? It
Yeah.
was a
As much as
calibration.
you want, it turns
Well,
out.
right. But yeah, the calibration is so hard.
Yeah.
And I think if we looked at each of your books, I wonder if you would, I would have to look at them closely again because I've read them all. But, if you think that the narrative distance and the reflective, narrator and the character vary a lot in between or not, or if you've
Yeah.
kept that, it's so much to think about.
It is a lot to think about. And once we go down the voice rabbit hole, right? Because voice is everything we talk about.
Yeah. I mean, just ask
In
Sonia
one
Huber,
term.
who, she wrote a
Oh,
book on voice, right? I know you
yeah.
two are friends.
And you do get to have multiple voices, right?
Yes.
So, and then those multiple voices can be set in multiple times,
It's a
right?
lot.
And
It's a lot.
so it's a lot to handle. It is a lot to handle. And you are doing that here. So I am going to want to talk about time because I love it. And now I want to kind of talk about, because I do think that I'm going to see, I've gone off script completely.
It's fun though, isn't it? We have a conversation. It's fun.
It is fun. Okay. I do feel like the prologue sets us up for thinking about this folding of time, right? Mm-hmm. This idea of like Nabokov's magic carpet that we fold and we allow readers to trip and we find out where those intersections are that create friction and questions and excitement. And so I'm sure, because I have done this multiple times and my most recent book took me 20 years to write, and I had to keep moving the point from which I was telling the story as things changed. Mm-hmm. And so I just want you to just kind of say whatever it is that you want to say about things that you discovered about working with time and these kind of multiple versions of Ronit that were coming in. And also, if you did feel like you had to establish a sense of where you were standing to tell the story, that kind of
Mm-hmm.
why here, why now, and how
Yeah.
that affected that process for you.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Such a good topic. And I want to confess that when I was first working on the memoir, I actually, of course, it's a childhood memoir. When do you start it? When do you end it? Do you
Yeah.
go until you're the age you are when you're writing it? How do you end it? Blah, blah, blah. Also, I mistakenly believed, well, maybe it's just an opinion, that I needed to end the book when I'm 14 and another big dramatic thing happens and just leave it like that and not let the reader know that things kind of
Ah,
resolved and that I'm okay now. I thought that no one would care about my story. This is so funny to me. Now it's so funny to me. I
yeah.
thought that if I confessed and showed the reader that I have a relationship with my mom now, that I found my way and have children and a husband,
Interesting.
that the reader wouldn't care and would think that my story wasn't that extreme. And then one of the editors who worked with me
Wow.
said, "No, no, 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 no. It's because you got married. It's because you have a relationship with your mom. It's because you have this perspective as as someone who
Yeah.
is more settled now, that your story is all
Yeah.
the more interesting and compelling." And so isn't it funny that I wanted to just abandon 14-year-old me in this sort
Just
of
leave her
limbo?
behind.
Just it's too bad. Bye-bye. And maybe that had to do with a fiction point of view, that it had to be super
Yeah.
dramatic. I don't know, because I was writing pretty sad fiction. My fiction was rooted a lot in my nonfiction life, my real life, and I was just masking it for many years. I don't know
Yeah.
about your fiction.
Well, yes, you do. I think you probably
Yeah.
do.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I had like, a mother loss, check. Bad families, check. Marriages that are failing, check. All the things. So
Yeah.
that was all my fiction. But finally, I realized, oh, wait, I can talk to the younger me as the one who's a landed, more mature version of myself who
Yes.
survived and is living to tell the tale, here to tell the tale. And that's when I started to kind of go in there and add my thoughts and my perspective. And so I didn't have like a chart
Yeah.
or a spreadsheet about how many times I was going to go back and do that. But if it offered the opportunity to say, hey, these days when I have dinner on
Yes.
Shabbat dinners on Friday nights, my parents get along, they talk, and it's just so strange because
Yes.
back then they couldn't be in the same room together. Or here's my father constantly talking about the days back in the kibbutz when he loved it, when in fact those were some of the most stressful times for my mom ever. So it's
Yeah.
just we do have this bleeding over of experience. And
Yes.
and my father gave me a lot of the books about Bhagwan that he had collected when my mom left, because my father was trying to get some clarity about this guru that she was
Yeah.
involved with. And this was after
Yeah.
they were divorced. He got
You
all
have a
these.
funny scene about that in the book.
Yes,
You're
I
like,
do.
thanks, Dad.
Yeah, I'm like, thank you very much, Dad. Right. And so if you had told me at the beginning of my memoir process that I would write about the fact that my dad gave me books to help work on my memoir,
Yes.
I never would have imagined that I could have done that. But
Yeah.
I think I understood that, it's very fluid. We don't have to compartmentalize it. We can allow things to seep in and touch each other, let
Yes.
the tendrils kind of expand and let the roots go deep. I'm going to go for a silly metaphor, but
Yes.
let the roots go deep, let the branches extend upward, and just be very expansive and see what we get when we do that. And if our readers tell us, if our trusted readers and editors say, whoa, 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 you're losing me, then we know where we can pare down.
Yes.
And if they say they want more, then we can expand more. But as Lucy Greeley told one of my guests when Lucy Greeley was teaching this student,
Yeah.
and I know we lost her, Autobiography of a
Yeah.
Face, Lucy Greeley.
Mm, brilliant book.
Yes, yes. One of the ones I read in my MFA program that Deborah recommended, it's better to just show us as much as you can in your drafts. Let us see the reflection, tell us what you're feeling,
Yeah.
ruminate on the page. And then later, if you need to cut it, we can, but we won't know what we need until you show it to us. So
Yeah.
let's see it.
Yeah. And I think that that's done so beautifully here. And I think it's one of the things, I mean, I love everything about memoir, but
Mm.
that I love that choice that we have, right, to go back and erase the traces of our path or not, right? Like sometimes it's part of the
Yes.
stories. We
Yes,
see
and it's
that,
not
sometimes it's
everything,
not.
right? I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not talking, look, I have a lot of other stories. I'm sure you do too. There are a lot of stories in my life and my personal life and my family that I could tell, but some of them I'm not ready to, or
Yes.
it's not something I can tell. And I felt very, and I know this comes to some of the stuff we're going to talk about later about what I've learned, but I felt very okay about going back and telling the story of young me. I felt like these things happened when I was young. My parents were decades younger. I was decades younger. I didn't feel like I was hurting too many people or I was going to jeopardize relationships too badly. And we'll talk about that later. But
Yeah.
writing about my children now, that's a
Yeah.
little bit different. And we can talk, that's a whole nother panel right there. I'd love to do that. That's different.
It's
And writing,
panel proposal time,
let's do.
Ronit.
Oh, I know. I got the email. Ding, 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 ding. I already have a couple of ideas. But so, like my husband, right? He's really private. I don't think he wants me to write anything about
Yeah.
him. And so I may have to just hold the line there, right? But
Yeah.
going back and talking about my own childhood, me as a child and what I experienced, my truth back then, that was open. I was like, that's fine. And I do want to say one more thing before you say your next question, which is about the time thing. Back
Yeah.
before when I was writing it and I thought I had to leave 14-year-old me stranded there, I also didn't understand that the memoir isn't everything and it's not about what happened. It was before I understood you have to make meaning from the things that have
Yeah.
their claws in you and basically find the story that you're trying to tell. And so then I knew where to cut it off because I knew
Yeah.
where I would resolve some of those issues.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is kind of dipping back into everything you were saying about time. But for me in this memoir, the most vital relationship is between now Ronit, who comes with, I think, tremendous and laudable empathy for little Ronit, right?
Mm.
Which we don't always see, especially in the first memoir, honestly, right?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
I think that I know I did it in Darkroom. I beat myself up a lot, and you do a little
Mhm.
bit, but like
Mhm.
you are Ronit that goes back to get that Ronit in this book, does it with such tenderness, I
Oh, I'm
think.
so happy to hear that.
And so I think that's the most important relationship in the book. I
Hmm.
really do, despite all of these other complicated relationships that, of course, you and she are navigating,
Well,
right?
I think that is lovely to hear. And what a wonderful goal to have when writing a memoir, if you can do that. If you can,
Yeah.
because memoir can be an act of reclamation. It can help
Yeah.
heal and process and help you understand and rewrite your story. But you're right. If you can go back with love, with understanding, with really open-eyed, open-armed
Yeah.
vision and clarity about who you were back then and rewrite a little bit about what happened or
Yeah.
right, we can't change what happened to us, but
Yeah.
I know this may sound cliche, but we can recapture, own the
Yeah.
story in a new way when we tell it.
Yeah. Yeah, we can change the story that we want to tell about it. Absolutely. And I feel like you came to that with just such power, right?
Oh,
I
thank
just
you.
always felt, and the word that kept coming to me was like gentleness, right? Which I think is something we all need to cultivate when we're going back to kind of pick up these pieces.
You know what, I
Okay.
don't think I could have done that until I was ready to do it. Like, I don't think I could
Yeah.
have written this in my 30s, certainly not.
Yeah. Interesting. That's another panel
Another
subject,
panel.
right?
I'm filing
Yeah.
it under panels.
Okay. Okay, I am curious to hear about the research. I want to touch some of my formal questions here because there's a fair amount of research blended in. And of course, it's a very interesting story about your mom, and it became a big deal on Netflix, right? In kind of the public consciousness, the story of Bhagwan. And if I were a betting woman, and I'm not actually, I'm very safe that way, I would wager that you had a lot more of that and the cult that you did not include here because there was a lot to find. And I know your dad brought you that stack of books. So, can you talk some about the relationship between research, this kind of research that is both external and like deeply personal, and how you kind of balance that in your writing and specifically for this book?
Yeah, thank you. Because now I feel like maybe I'm a smarter writer that I was able to say that I can say that I had some research in my memoir because it really was there to, I didn't starting out think I was going to use research at all. And nowadays there's so much memoir, braided memoir, research memoir, memoir plus,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's very appealing in some ways. But I think I felt that I needed to substantiate some of what I experienced and also fill in some of the information my mom did not have. My
Yeah.
mom literally
Yeah.
does not remember a lot of the stuff, or if she does, she can't seem to recall it to tell me. So, and I don't think she's hiding anything, honestly. I just think it was a different time and things just blended together, and who knows what kind of drugs they were taking there. I just don't know. But
I
I
know this
felt
dynamic extremely well, let me tell you.
I know you do. I know you do.
It turns out that marijuana is not good for memory.
Yeah, I mean,
Please continue.
well, but also here's the funny thing, like it wasn't until I was in a therapy session in my 40s that the therapist said, "Well, you know that Bhagwan's cult was called the sex cult. You know he was called the sex guru, right?" And I did not. I did not know that. And I was just stunned. No one in my family said he was the sex guru. But of course, my dad knew that. And that's
Yeah.
why he had so many misgivings and was so worried about everything. And probably was pissed off that his ex wife went there, honestly.
Sure.
Yeah, I did not know this. How did I get to my 40s without knowing that he was a sex guru? So, part of the research and part of my looking into old news articles, from I think
Yeah.
the Oregonian or the Oregon Times, whatever, I forgot what it was, and the books that my dad gave me was to sort of excerpt verbatim some of what Bhagwan had said and preached without shining too much of a light on him because he doesn't deserve the spotlight, but to show the reader a
Yes.
little bit about what I'm talking about.
Yes.
To
Yeah.
show the
That's another
reader.
tension.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. To show the reader that actually, yes, people were wondering what happened to the kids on the ashrams in India and Oregon, because I wondered what my mom thought when she saw kids on the ashram. Should I have gone with her? When I saw the docuseries, they didn't spend any time on the
Yeah.
kids, which I talk about. And I also wrote a piece on that for The Atlantic. That was glaring to me. So I did want to substantiate some of what was written about that time. So people would say, hey, look, it's not just me in my little story talking about my mom leaving for this guy. This guy had an ashram that was assembling many weapons,
Yeah.
biological weapons, actual guns, explosives. Like they had a lot of nefarious, they were doing wiretapping, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And also to show that, I wasn't the only person who was affected by their parent leaving for this guru. And so
Yes.
it actually was a pleasure to include it. And I don't think I'm aware of having to cut a lot of it out. To me, the experience felt very seamless now that I think
Yeah.
about it. It was a pleasure because I love research and I love that academic side.
Yeah.
And it was also very affirming to be able to use those resources, to be able to say, hey, this is where this guy started. But I will say the balance for me was not giving too much attention to Bhagwan because I really
Yes.
didn't want to make it about him.
Yes. I didn't notice that consciously while I was reading. And now that you say that, I'm like, oh, totally. You did that. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good work.
Thank
So,
you.
also,
Yeah.
another thing you said that I think is so true of this book, and I think it's so important for all memoirs. So we'll like throw out this writer tip thing, in that you said that you were thinking about those other children on the ashrams, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I and this idea that you were not the only one, right? No matter what it is, we are not the only one. And when
Mm-hmm.
that awareness comes into a book like this, I think it changes everything, and it changes the space that you make for the reader to enter into.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
that's totally here.
Well, thank you. And I also want to talk about that curiosity piece because I remember watching the docuseries, and I don't know if it's in the book, but I wrote something that the Rumpus published, but there may be an aspect of this in the book. But when I watched the docuseries, they were talking to old sannyasins, followers of Bhagwan, who seemed kind of sad that everything, had blown up and it ended.
Mm-hmm.
They'd really enjoyed their time in India and Oregon, and I understand that. So I was sort of annoyed that, they weren't talking about the negative sides of Bhagwan. And then I realized, wait, this guy had made his life with Bhagwan, had lived on the ashram, had been his lawyer, had felt that this was a
Yeah.
utopia that he was always going to have. And then it all went kaput. And so I actually felt like I get it. You lost your daddy or you lost your place to be, you lost your home. I did too. So I understood
Yeah.
it on that level instead of just, cursing him and being
Yes.
angry. I think
Yeah.
that the curiosity piece is there. Just show the reader, show yourself and reflect on it and interrogate that. And that will go so far in your narrative to help illuminate your story.
The listeners are very much going to want you to have them read to them again. And we're actually at a perfect spot for you to read the part that I chose from the chapter titled Meanwhile, back at the ashram.
I know, it's so funny that meanwhile, back at the ashram, it makes me laugh.
It made me laugh
I
also.
had a little bit of fun with that. Okay. In interviews, I've read that some people who grew up on the ashram remember the experience as being a good one, that they were free and could explore and carve out their own lives in Pune or on Rancho Rajneesh, the Oregon ranch. Others have less fond memories of their time as a young sannyasin. I suppose if I had gone as a child and had been raised amongst Bhagwan's disciples and steeped in his teachings, surrounded by other kids on the loose like me, I'd have grown used to it. Maybe I would have liked the blurry boundaries and the absence of parents, the missing family structure. Undoubtedly, I would have become a wholly different person. But it's because of the role Bhagwan played in my life that I fully reject everything he stood for and what he offered his followers. And ultimately, it wouldn't have mattered if I had gone to live with my mother on the ashram. I would have lost her anyway.
Beautiful. Thank you. So the reason I had you read that section is not for memoir political reasons, which is that I think speculative nonfiction might be going too far, but because this is the use of speculation in nonfiction that I can really get behind.
Yes.
Right? Moving us to a deeper truth by having this narrator imagine a different history for herself and what that outcome would have been. Right.
Yes.
So can you talk about using that here and
the
just
speculative?
Yeah. But in this very particular way, because I do feel like this is another panel, but I do feel like there's other ways that we jump off into fiction in ways that I am not fully comfortable with. And this is a way I am fully comfortable with. So
yeah. I think that this allows me as the writer and hopefully then the reader to know to hold space for other possibilities, to contemplate and add room in the narrative. I appreciate that I did that. I forgot that section. I haven't read the book in its entirety in a long time. And so I appreciate that you
I
picked
just
that
reread
out.
it in the last couple of days, so I'm fresh.
Yes, thank you. And I think that it is a pleasure to read that because it does keep it from being just a claustrophobic tale of growing up in Flushing and missing my mom. And you get to pan out a little bit into the more universal truth. And also to know what I know now, because it doesn't remedy the situation for the character me, and it doesn't change what happened to my life ultimately. But it does offer a little bit of a cushion so that you can, and maybe opens the windows a little bit metaphorically, so you get some fresh air in there, some new light on the situation, and remember that it's about more than just me and more than just this moment in time. It's kind of like what I didn't know then, what I know now, and I can kind of superimpose it a little bit on the story.
Yeah. It in a way really feels like a that the now narrator is kind of reaching a hand back, and then we have to come back up to this deep grief, right? This I would have lost her anyway.
Yeah. I mean, it is such an interesting thing. You've written memoirs, you've written 3 of them, right? And it's like you still, I don't know about you, but I'm still coming to grips with my experience. Writing it does not mean it's over. And I still think sometimes about some of it. Oh, that happened. And then that happened. Wow. Who was that happened to? How did I get through that? It's just this
You're
body.
Doing great, by the way. You're just doing amazing.
I mean, when you think about like what your body
look at
has
us
been
now.
Look at us. Headphones, microphones. We have our own homes. Yeah. We're not stoned.
No, all of
I'm
these
not.
things. Yeah, I'm not either. Okay, we're right where we can visit this question, which I think a lot of your listeners probably grapple with. So this book has both, I write better than I talk, so I'm going to read what I said. I said, I'm interested in the way you interlace the quotidian horrors of childhood and teen years, right? So dealing with boys, good and bad hair days, pretty serious stuff like body image and poor Misty the cat. You'll just have to read the book to know. With the really, really, really big stuff, the abandonment, the Halloween assault, the requirement daily to grow up in kind of this ever shifting sands with no security and with I already quoted this, but I love it, with no blueprint for making a relationship work. So how do you see as as folks who are kind of starting out to look at this stuff, and I think about this a lot in my own work, right? Because I have some pretty horrible stuff that I'm grappling with. And then I also have like pretty common, pretty average, like we all do it every day kind of stuff I'm grappling with. How do you see the relationship between those kind of two species of material?
Yeah, well, thank you. I think that the core of the book, as I followed Deborah Gortney's advice, was to just write these 10 to 12 events that I knew had to be there, and those could potentially become chapters. I know a lot of memoir
Yeah.
teachers talk about this, and
Yeah.
that's just a jumping off place. It might change, but then I knew there would be connective tissue, and how do I get to this place, and where am I in time, and what's been happening? And I think that so some of the very strong memories made the cut right away. I knew they had to be there. And then there were some memories that might not have been super tragic or super sad or scary, but I'll never forget, you know? And I knew that those had to be in there too. And where did they belong? And I think that it's like when we write really difficult material or we write about a character who is really mean or harsh or violent, you will wear yourself out as well as the reader if you
Yes.
just if it's an onslaught of negative, 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 negatives. I've read books where the bad things happen, they pile up, they pile up. I know you've
Yeah.
probably read some of these. There's not a lot
Yes.
of meaning making in between. There's not a lot of moving the needle narratively, psychologically, emotionally, and
Do
it's
you know
kind
what
of
I call that? I just realized.
yeah.
Sorry to
What
interrupt,
do you
but
call it?
I do have a term for this, what you're
What is it? Tell me.
describing.
Tell me.
I call it raw pain.
Yeah. Okay. I like that better. You mean like unprocessed a little bit, like a
Unprocessed
yeah,
pain. That's what I mean by it.
yeah,
Just
yeah.
like the unprocessed, because it's not that it's not the thing, right? It's that it's not
The
it's raw.
delivery. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I
And we're
think that
making art out of it. Yeah.
yes, right. It's the raw pain. And, you know, it may have been the worst thing that happened to you. It's excruciating. It left indelible marks on you. And that does belong in your book, perhaps. However, to make it into art, as you're saying, and to move a narrative along and to get you on this journey, at least in memoir,
Yes.
it's serving a purpose. What is the purpose? Which is why you might not have identical scenes of the same thing happening over and over when you're in jeopardy or you're in kind of a catastrophe, right? So for
Yes.
me, I think I don't know if it was conscious or not. Like some of the stuff in my childhood was funny, was ridiculous, you know, and I like to add it. And some of it is lighter, like
Yes.
my uncle calling me Miss Piggy, you know, wasn't fun, but it is kind of, you know, it's a lot softer than my mom leaving. But then I get to later on call him the Miss Piggy,
Yes.
my Miss Piggy uncle. And then everyone in the
Yeah.
book will know, and everyone who's read knows, oh, she's talking about the uncle who called her Miss Piggy when she was 9. And so
Yeah.
it's an intimacy and a shorthand the reader gets to experience the way I felt it.
Yes.
And then thinking about my hair and my body and my clothes, that was tough, you know, but writing, I'm trying to think about the lighter moments because are there any?
Well, another one, and then
Mm.
when I'm teaching, I call this opposite world
Yes,
sometimes
yes. And you write
because I
about
want
that
people,
in your new book.
yeah, I want people to, you're drinking out of, my husband has that same cup. It's his favorite cup.
The Crusade? The
Yeah.
Crusade? Yeah.
Shout out to Crusade.
Yeah. I almost said it
um,
wrong. My French friends. Oh,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
But sorry, I was distracted momentarily by the cup.
Opposite
What was I
world.
saying?
Opposite
Opposite
world.
world. Okay, so in opposite world, so I think in your book, part of the opposite world is like the time when you were very, very young on the kibbutz, right?
On the kibbutz. Yeah.
And
And
so,
also, I just remembered another one too, which is when the cult specialist comes to our camp to tell us to be aware of cults. And I realize, oh, my
yes,
mom might be on one. But I start the scene by trying to fix my socks to look as fluffy
yes,
and perfectly 80s as possible. And
yes,
while it's about how I don't have expensive socks and I wish I did, it's still
yes,
very like, it's a very everyday type of thing.
yes, I remember.
Right? Yeah.
I also did not have the right kinds of socks,
Oh,
but was
no.
trying.
No Benetton for me. But yes, about the
You're a
kibbutz.
little bit younger. Were you around and worrying about these things when we had to have Nikes, which
Oh,
I only had one pair my entire childhood and I made them last forever. And you couldn't, the laces had to be replaced with those weird laces that had like the shamrocks or the ponies or the
let me
hearts
tell
on
you,
them.
I was so far away from even getting into that room that you were in.
Yeah.
I was in the basement below the basement.
Oh
We
no.
shopped at Modell's. I didn't even
Yeah.
know. I mean, forget it. Like I would be happy with a
Yeah.
pair of Jordache jeans. That's all you
Yeah.
know, that was what my
Yeah.
eyes were on. But I was wearing like army surplus t-shirts that we got at Modell's. But so the kibbutz, you asked me, I know I kind of cut you off to tell you about the socks, but I think you were talking earlier when we were discussing questions about this sort of pastoral thing I offer with
Yeah.
the kibbutz. And it's interesting. And I want to talk about this in terms of backstory too, because when I was writing the book, I knew it had to start at Newark in the airport. And then I discovered, oh, I want to then show me as a grown-up watching the docuseries and what that does to me, because it's like the past comes calling.
Yes.
But how do I let the reader know that I'm not just any woman in this generation watching us, my mom go off to a cult? I came from an experience so opposite, although in some ways similar because it was communal living. I
Yeah.
came from a place that was that cradled me, where I was safe and where I could be a child, and where my strength and my pluckiness was celebrated, where
Yes.
everyone knew me and everything was where I needed it to be, that I could take everything for granted as a child, I believe should be able to. So then I went back to backstory to show where I'd been born, how my parents met. And I was very
Yeah.
worried that the backstory would go on too long and people would be bored. I was so worried I would lose the reader. So I made sure with my trusted readers and my editors that they were not bored. I was terrified that in delivering this information about where I came from, the reader would be yawning. So I was very worried about that. But I also fully believed that this is the last time you're going to see this character in a safe, cozy place that, where
Oh,
everyone knows her. So I felt that was really important because of what happens later where
yeah.
I lose all of that.
I'll tell you, it's one of my favorite parts of the book, but also I am not of that world and didn't know about like being with the other children and the way all
Yeah,
of that
sleeping in
worked.
the
And
same place. Yeah.
I was fascinated by that. And also I was like, wow, what a great idea. Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
and also a strange experiment because
I
some
mean,
people will
strange, but
say,
also kind of
yeah,
wonderful. I mean, all I'm saying is that everything about it was like completely fascinating to me. And because you had me so rooting for this child, I was just happy to see her happy. Like the part where she goes along and she's walking by the houses and she stops every place to chat and to
yeah,
get a snack or a drink of
yes.
water,
Yes, my
like
parents told me
love
that
that.
story all the time, that they would never know where I was and I had stopped and gotten a cookie or chocolate from everyone. I mean, come on. It's a 2 block
Yeah.
walk. Do you know how many houses you can make? And I was
It was like
3.
trick or treating every
Yes,
day.
it was like, "Hey, let me get some snacks." Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, I think that, and I guess I just think in a book that has to take on so much lack of care, right?
Mm.
Just the
Yeah.
just the nurture was such a kind of lovely pairing. I mean, it's also true, right? It would have to be
Yeah,
true,
yeah.
but I fully thought it belonged here and thought it was
Oh,
really
I'm so
integral
glad.
to
And I
the
also
larger
think this
story.
shows, I think you're also maybe speaking to when we do this as memoirists, when we can show a full bodied experience, we
Yeah.
can show the contrast. I think maybe it's, implied, it's subconscious, but the reader will trust us more because I think they see we are able to see the good in our lives and what was wonderful, which
Yes.
then makes what isn't good so much more reliable. Just like when you have
Yes.
maybe my mom, my dad, my grandparents, they had their flaws and their problems. And oh, they made a really good lasagna, or oh, what was really
Yes.
awesome was the stories they made up at night before I went to sleep. A little bit of texture, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And we just brought ourselves to a segue to the Love Boat because
Yes.
in my memoir, it might be in an essay. I think it
Which
might
of
be in
your
an essay.
memours? Because I've got
I
all
think
3 of them right here. I'm going to hold them up. Wait,
I
I'm
think it
holding
was
them.
actually in my essay collection, if this were fiction. There's an essay called Going Back to Plum Island, which is about
Hmm.
returning to the place where I was sexually abused for years. So
Hmm.
that's dark, right?
Hmm.
And I have an actual sentence. This made me think of this sentence, and this is the segue where I say, it wasn't all bad, right? Like, and it's really important to me to go back to that time, look at it critically, and there were horrors, right?
Hmm.
And in truth, it wasn't all bad.
Hmm.
There was joy. And then one of the joys I mentioned is that on Saturday night, I would pedal myself down on my rainbow seat bicycle down to the store at the center of the island, load up on Swedish fish, which you could get for 1 penny each. So I would get 100 in a little paper bag and I would pedal my way back and I would set myself up in front of the television set with the rabbit ears and the tinfoil, and I'd get it just right. And then it would be time for Love Boat and Fantasy
It's a
Island.
2-hour block. I mean,
My
that was
gosh.
the best. I mean, there wasn't a lot else on also. This wasn't, this was the 80s, but that was appointment television. I mean, you went and you watched that, and I loved it. I mean, that shaped our childhoods.
Yes.
But
and
also,
so,
can we
let's
talk about
each give
100
one
Swedish
way.
fish? My gosh, 100
No.
Swedish fish. Did you eat them all? I mean, I would get sick, but I love
think
those
I did.
Swedish fish.
I too was a sort of a chubby child.
But
and I loved sweet, and actually I still love Swedish fish. And did I go to that store, which was still open, these many years later? And did I buy Swedish
Did you?
fish? Oh, yes, I did.
Yes. No, I love them too. I love them too. And I do want to point out.
They only came in red back then.
Yes, I know. And I won't eat. That's what I want. But also, I have to say, and I told you this when I interviewed you about The Heart Folds Early, that you were definitely luckier in love and getting into relationships than I was. I just think, our paths diverged so greatly. Like if I wrote my memoirs at that time of being in my 20s, I think each chapter would end like this. Wah, wah.
And I, on the other hand, was I'm a serial memoirist, and I was until I met my very dear husband,
who's famous,
probably on the other side
from your
door.
books. Yeah.
He introduced me the other night at my hometown book launch, and he said, "You should tell your husband this because it might encourage him to let you write about him." He said, it made me cry. He said, "I wish I were the man that appears in Jill's books."
Oh my gosh. Okay, I'll tell him.
So we have to get to your standard questions. But before we leave the Love Boat and Fantasy Island, I need to know just one thing about either show that you loved. Just one detail.
Okay, I think I really liked Gopher. I think I thought he was cute. Like he was kind of cute, right? Like he was supposed to be kind of a nebbish, but cute. Yeah. And I really wanted Julie McCoy's bone structure. I just was, I mean, you know how skinny those women had to be? I mean, still to this day, they were just so, quote, perfect, so I love that. I mean, the rest of them, they're fine. And Fantasy Island, in hindsight, it's really kind of.
I know, cringy.
And also what I know about that show was it definitely had themes that were like darker and less sunnier than The Love Boat, right? Yes. There was always something sort of ominous or weird going on. And that show felt a little more adult than Love Boat. Yeah. Sometimes I felt like I was in adult world over there.
Yeah. I hear all.
How about you?
That.
What did you like about Love Boat?
Well, I mean, it really comes down to Julie McCoy, but what I really coveted was just the clipboard and what she could make happen with it. You know what I mean?
I should have said that. Oh my gosh.
Right? I mean, I still think of it. Every once in a while, I just try to pick up a clipboard and just kind of sort of channel my.
Oh my gosh. And this may be where my love of lists came from, because whenever my sister and I were home for the day or we were sick, I just have a list according to time, 8:05, eat cereal, 8:20, clean up the stuffed animals, 8, I just would schedule us. So maybe I also got the Julie McCoy clipboard on me.
Yes. Well, I mean, on a more serious note, right? Like as children who had not well-ordered lives, right? It actually makes a ton of sense.
It really does.
Appealed to us.
So did the Brady Bunch. I mean, I mean, please give me a bathrobe with matching slippers and stairs to walk up and down, please.
Well, and that's before we even get to Alice. Anyway, we truly do digress.
But I know that the Let's Talk Memoir fans are in this generation too, and they probably love that we're talking about this. Don't you? Okay, go on.
Don't you? It's pretty great. Okay, I can just skip. There's so many questions. I'm going to.
It was going to happen. There's no way we can keep ourselves on track.
I know. Mm-hmm. I'm going to ask one Let's Talk Memoir question. So I'm choosing between my Let's Talk Memoir questions. You have done, and I looked this up, so I might be wrong, but I might be right. 235 episodes?
You're right. At the time of this publishing, who knows?
At the time of, okay. Mm-hmm. So congratulations.
Thank you.
What a feat.
Thank you.
And this is an impossible question. So
Okay.
forgive me, but I truly am curious because I'm driven by curiosity.
Mhm.
Can you pinpoint something or say up to three somethings that you've learned about any part of the memoir writing process that you wish you'd known when you were writing When She Comes Back?
Yes, and I've prepared.
Okay.
Yes, thank you so much. And at the time that this airs, we're going to be at the beginning of season 8, and I'm so excited. I'm not going anywhere. I love doing the show. I can't believe it's
Yay.
accumulated like this. So I guess here's some things that I didn't know when I was writing my book. You can't resolve the structure of your memoir until you know what your story is about. And often
Yeah.
you don't really know what your story is truly about until you excavate and discover it in the memoir writing process. So for my students who wonder about structure, I always say, let's just stick to the narrative arc, the psychological and emotional themes, and what we're trying to uncover and discover, the question your memoir is asking. And I promise structure will be there when we're ready. And the other thing that I wanted to say is you can trust the memories that you have and know that they are trying to tell you something. The ones that stay with you are telling you something, and those are really good places to begin your work, whether they're light or
Yes.
dark memories. Get in there and figure out. You just said curiosity.
Yeah.
What is it about
Yeah.
this that keeps snagging? Go and check
Yeah.
it out. Maybe there's some good material there. And then last, here's my third. Memoir takes a really long time, which Deborah Gwartney warned me about, but I didn't believe. I thought I was going to get my thesis, after I bound and printed and bound my thesis for the program. I was thinking, it's going to get published. And she just kind of shook her head very gently. And I should have listened. It takes a long time. It's good that it takes a long time. And I think that it can have fallout. I think I am pleased with the way I navigated my personal relationships and my parents and sister, showing them the pages beforehand. That's another panel. I am really pleased. I followed Mary Carr's advice about showing pages to people
Yeah.
that might, the parts that might make them wince. I'm really happy I did that. I will do that again in the future.
Yes.
I think you should think for a while about what you want to share with the world, what you're willing to put on blast in your memoir before you just go in and publish it. Just give it some time.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
It's a long game.
Yeah,
We know
it's a
that.
long
Yeah.
game.
Ronit,
Yes,
what are
Joy.
you working on now? We need to know.
Oh my goodness. Well, okay. I can't totally say yet. By the time of this airing, it probably will be okay. But I do have a book on submission, and it's looking good, and it's memoir-y, and I will be celebrating it, as soon as I can share exactly what's going on. And then
Okay.
I'm also teaching a workshop, a 5-day in-person memoir workshop at the Larry McMurtry Literary Center in Texas
Oh,
this fall.
fantastic.
So and I'm teaching at Memoir Nation. So I wanted to do more teaching this last year, and I'm
Yeah.
really happy and thrilled that that has happened. And
Fantastic.
so now I'm just pretty much juggling my various teaching gigs and working on closing the deal with this book that is on submission.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, I am going to be waiting by the podcast for that
No,
information.
I'll
Yeah.
email you
Yeah, that'd be great. Actually, I was
directly.
going to be like, if you could just tell me direct so I
I'll
know.
tell you directly. Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. And this is what I'm following your excellent form. I have to ask a book recommendation
Yes. Yes.
question,
Yes. Yes.
even as I know this puts you in a tricky position
Yes.
with all of those episodes.
I've
And
come prepared.
so I will ask it really specifically. When you were writing, When She Comes Back,
Hmm.
what particular books in any genre influenced, supported, gave permission for that writing? And then I say here, in fact, let me break that question down even further. What text in any genre helped you to answer the question, can I say this in the affirmative?
Mm-hmm.
And what text in any genre helped you with the next question we all need to tackle? How can I say this?
Gorgeous questions in my Jewish accent. So my New York Jewish accent. So, okay.
Lovely.
I love this question, and I'm really happy for the framing because I love the memoirists and their books that come on the show, and I would never choose a memoir baby over another one. So what I will say is that when I was new to the craft and the genre, I got a lot of books that have been well established, and a lot of them in the beginning were white male writers. And I will say that I have read so many other books now, and it's structurally different, the linear, lyric, experimental, people from everywhere, not just white men. But what really showed me about memoir was This Boy's Life by Tobias Wolff. I studied it. It was part of my thesis. I had to try to understand the reflection. And Deborah kept trying to tell me, Deborah Courtney, notice, the reflection and the narrator in there. I was like, it was on my desk during revisions. The Situation and the Story by Vivian Gornick.
Yeah.
To Show and to Tell by Philip Lopate. And Philip Lopate was also on the podcast. And Notes of a Native Son by James Baldwin, which was
it's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it was really one of my first essay collections because I think I kind of went underground and forgot about reading for a couple of decades. I was not a writing teacher like you were. I was not a writer. I was an actor. It was not even on my radar to be a writer, even though my sister kept saying, you should write, you should write. So those are my 4. And I will also, there's a special shout out to one that people never mention on my show called Stop Time by Frank Conroy.
Which, I know. I used to teach that one.
Yeah, I studied it so deeply and it was part of my thesis as well. So we see a lot of old white men. I am sorry, everyone.
Yeah. No, I learned a lot from that book. That's a great list. We will put these into the show notes. I'm throwing in an extra question that I forgot to ask, but of course it's a no-brainer. I should have had it on the list before, which is, Ronit, if you were interviewing yourself about when she comes back, what question would you have asked yourself? And then can you answer it?
Wait, what
is that
question?
too hard?
No.
What would you have asked yourself? If you were, and then answer it.
Yeah. How do you feel the memoir writing process has changed you? So I can answer.
How do you feel the memoir writing process has changed you, Ronit?
Yes. I learned, though I had been in therapy for many years on and off, I think it was in writing When She Comes Back that I grew to appreciate the extent of what my mom had experienced in her own life before she had children and what my father had experienced. I think I came to understand also so much more certainly, and also for the first time, that my mom left because of who she was, not because of who I was. And while that might seem really, really clear to a parent and to most people who grew up with a decent, pretty predictable life, it wasn't something I understood. I really did think there was something wrong with me. I even said in therapy in my 30s once, we were good kids. I don't know why she left. I literally said that. And so it really did change my relationship. And you know what else? I'm closer to my mom now. She listens to the show. So hi, Mom. I'm closer to my mom now than I was when I wrote the book. And I know that doesn't always happen, but the memoir has given me so much, so much. And I can't believe, I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't found this genre. So I'm very grateful.
Yeah. That was the most beautiful question and the most beautiful answer to that beautiful question. I'm looking at page 4, which is something that I have squiggly lines by in the margin, which means I really, really think it's important. And it's the part where you write, I didn't realize I wanted the answer for, since the first time she left, what Bhagwan gave her worth leaving Nava and me for, right? And that connects to this idea of not understanding that she left for who she was, not because of who y'all were. And it just is, it's beautiful. And I think a pattern that we've heard here today is this idea. I think sometimes in memoir we talk about like the element of forgiveness. And I don't really, sometimes it's about that, of course, but I don't feel like that's not, to me, the most powerful thing that happens. To me, the most powerful thing that happens is that it's not about finding forgiveness. It's about finding a deeper empathy, a deeper understanding, which then can bring that back towards us, right? Towards ourselves. Like that idea that you could like put down this idea that there was something wrong with that child that made the mom leave, right?
Yeah, like I can love myself and have empathy for myself, and I can love my mom and have empathy for her and my father and my sister, and also understand that. And for me, it's more about acceptance or understanding that this is the way things were, and it's not personal in the sense. And I don't actually use the word forgiveness. I don't know if you do.
Yeah, no, I don't either. And I don't either. I mean, not really consciously, but to me, it really, I'm just thinking of out loud right now, but this idea that that this deepening of empathy, and empathy begets empathy. And then that's
Yes.
a nice place to live, world, right?
Yes, world.
Let's see how I am,
Curiosity.
world.
I mean, I'm a broken record, but curiosity,
Yeah.
vulnerability,
Yes. Close
courage, empathy. Yeah,
observation.
close observation, asking questions, not always
Yeah.
knowing the answers.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is how we get to live. So we're very lucky
We are very
also.
lucky. We are. Well, I'm extra lucky that you did this. This was really, I mean, I know I said it before, but truly, if you had told me in 2015 that the book I was holding, Dark Room by Jill Christman, was the writer would one day interview me on my podcast about memoir, my head would have popped off. I don't even know.
Oh, well, I am happy that the world has turned in a way that has brought us together on your
Me too.
podcast.
Me too.
And it's been so much fun. And I know I have one more very important question I need to ask,
Let's do it.
which is, where can people connect with you and your work and get a copy of When She Comes Back?
You did such good research. I love this. This is so fun. You can find a copy of When She Comes Back wherever books are sold. You can also go to ronitplank.com and look under my writing and find the book and get it there. Please support small bookstores, indie bookstores, and you can also get it as an audiobook, which I narrated. It's about 6 hours long, so not too big of a lift.
Yay. Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being my guest today on your very own program, Ronit.
Thank you for listening to Let's Talk Memoir. For more about my story and the project that started me on my memoir-loving path, you can check out my memoir, When She Comes Back, which is available wherever books are sold, and as an audiobook that I narrated. For more about this episode and my guest, please visit the links in the show notes. You can also find a complete catalog of Let's Talk Memoir episodes at ronitplank.com/Let's Talk Memoir. Let's Talk Memoir is also on Substack. About once a month, I publish memoir craft advice, additional interviews, and upcoming classes that I'm offering. There's no paywall. If you are a fan of Let's Talk Memoir, please feel free to share it with your friends. And if you feel moved to leave a podcast rating and review, I appreciate it very much. That helps more writers and readers find the show. Thank you so much for being here.